Yo, what's up, guys? As you noticed during this week, I have had check-ins of the end of the season with all of my AFC North guys. The AFC North guy I'm going to go with today is my guy Ace from Cincinnati, the Bengals fan. A lot to talk about the future of Joe Burrow. Where is the future of the Bengals? Where's that arrow pointed? And will they be a team that hopes to factor in to the competition in the AFC North? All that and more will be answered. Ace, let them know how you doing today, man. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, Quincy? Glad to be here. I'm doing good, bro. Looking into some of the offseason things, putting the season in perspective, kind of looking around at these players and free agency and the draft. So just kind of collecting my thoughts on the season and where I see things going forward.
By the way, y'all, you can tell it's been a rough season for Ace. He got his Spider-Man shirt on, his Laker hat on. He is trying to find his happy place on. I'm pretty sure those are PS5 headphones he got. He is finding his happy place right now.
Got to keep the positive vibes going. Yep. Huge Marvel fan. Me and my wife are actually watching the MCU stuff right now. Lakers obviously trying to bring back that back-to-back. It's going to be tough this year. But also, of course, with the Bengals, like I'm somewhat optimistic because we do have a top 5 pick. So that's the positive that I can take out of that is, hopefully, your fingers crossed, you're going to get a good player.
So speaking of that top 5 pick, man, what are you hoping to get there? What do you think Bengals fans are hoping to get there? And then ultimately, what's your read on where management and the franchise, what their direction is going to be at that pick?
It's hard to say, honestly, because free agency hasn't played out. But I think right now, the pulse, I'll give you 2 answers. What Bengals fans want is Jamar Chase. That's no question. A lot of them want to pair Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase, kind of have since we picked Joe Burrow last year. Me personally, I want Panay. I want Panay because you're getting a left tackle at 20 years old that you could possibly plug next to Joe Burrow for 15 years of his career. And he's a guy that's more athletic. He's better than what you have right now. Even if he comes in and doesn't live up to expectations, that's still better than what you have now. So that's what I'm looking forward to. That pick is either if Panay isn't there, the prayer is that Panay is there. If he isn't there, I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on Chase. I'd also like to see them even consider Kyle Pitts as well. I know some people may feel like that's too rich for a tight end, but to me, Kyle Pitts is a rare breed, and we obviously saw what Travis Kelce did this season, the emergence of tight ends just in general. You talk about Waller. These guys are getting 1,000 yards a season now. So those are some of the picks that would be on my list. Now, you also, on the defensive side of the ball, some people say that we need to add someone there. With this draft, I'm really not impressed with the edge rushers at all, especially Rousseau or any of those guys. Patrick Surtain, I would probably be upset with at 5. If you moved back to 8, though, I could take that. But he's not really a physical guy. I like his coverage and stuff like that. He's not physical. He's not trying to tackle. And as you know, in the AFC North, that's just not happening. But from those side of things, I expect that the Bengals front office will definitely be spending that top 5 pick on an offensive position. The only other thing that I think that they'll consider is if Chase and Panay, in the event that both of those guys are gone, which I think is kind of unlikely, I think that they would consider moving back a couple of spots and adding more picks in the draft.
So when we talk about kind of like rebuilding type situations, you always want to focus on what the attempted identity is of that rebuild. I think that's one of the most important parts. You got to have a direction if you're going to try to rebuild things. Mm-hmm. Do you have a inkling on where that rebuild is going? Like, is this going to be just all around Joe Burrow, getting him help with wide receivers? Is this going to be building a more physical, run-heavy team to support Joe Burrow, kind of similar to what the Browns have done in Cleveland and also what Baltimore has done with Lamar? Or is it going to be a focus on the defensive side of the ball? Like, where do you sense the focus is with this rebuild and where they're going to try to create the character of this team going forward?
I think that the focus of the rebuild is around Joe Burrow, and I think that there's going to be a strong emphasis this offseason on protecting him, possibly giving him another weapon, especially with them losing A.J. Green, John Ross. There's going to be a need for them to get another target there. But I think that that's what the focus is. And we kind of saw that essentially last season, where the focus was kind of on him in terms of the draft. But the other focus is also improving this defense. A lot of people have to remember that the Bengals, when they hired Lou Anarumo, they went from traditionally a nickel look to a 4-3 kind of a team really built for a 4-3 personnel to switching to like a 3-4 nickel kind of look. And that just was, in a sense, it's kind of been a terrible transition. And they've kind of tried to, and it's always a tough transition when you're going from 4-3 to 3-4 because it's two different schemes, different kind of player types that you need there. So that's where they ran into issues with Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, and you got a lot of guys that were left over from that 4-3 system, and they were trying to convert to the 3-4. So that's why you kind of saw last year they went out and they got DJ Reader, they went out and they kind of got Von Bell and some of these guys that were some of the Lou guys, and I think that you'll actually continue to see that. So although you'll see the emphasis maybe on like some linemen per se in free agency and maybe even the draft as well, I still think that you may see heavy defense from the free agency standpoint because they're still trying to get rid of some of those old personnel and bring in some new ones. And so I think that you'll see a little bit of the commitment to defense, but the commitment to defense isn't higher than Joe Burrow. And the reason that I say that is they're not going to pick a defensive player in the top 5. Like, they're not doing it. They're picking whoever is coming there is probably going to be offensive. And I'd even argue that they may go offense again in the second round. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see that, just like they did last season where they went heavy free agency defense. And then in the draft, they went Joe Burrow, T. Higgins. Like, I see them building around Joe Burrow. That's going to be the identity of this team. You also talked about, are they going to be a rushing team? I think that they want to be, and I think that Zach showed later in the year that he could be. The biggest move, though, I think for this team to get back to running effectively as well as also being able to pass effectively was hiring and bringing back Frank Pollock. Frank Pollock, when he was here in 2017, he came from the Dallas Cowboys. He took over essentially a line that was just as bad as this, right? And he made that line like play way better than they were. And that was one of Joe Mixon's best years running the ball. That was the one where he like took off in the second half of the season, and he just really had a tremendous feel for the run game. And that's what he's going to do again with us. So he's also not only going to be the offensive line coach, he finally has the official role of run game coordinator, but he technically was that back in 2017. And it's a strange thing because, I've heard for the most part, Mike Brown wanted that to happen because he was a huge Frank Pollock fan. And when they hired Zach Taylor, what happened was Zach Taylor didn't feel like the zone run scheme that Frank Pollock had and Zach Taylor's offense were going to be able to merge together and work effectively, which didn't make sense because us as fans, we were just like, Frank Pollock is a great offensive line coach. Why are you doing it? And I still remember when we got rid of Frank, like the first person that tweeted about it was Joe Mixon. He was like, how are you going to let one of the best offensive line coaches in the league just go? So I think that they're going to have to make this work. I think it will work, honestly, because it's going to be a mix of probably Frank Pollock with his zone run scheme with the LSU offense that we kind of saw with the Zach Taylor LA Rams offense kind of all mixed together. So I think that it'll help. But at the end of the day, you got to get some offensive linemen. Like, I don't care if you have, the best offensive line coach in the history, you still got to get the players.
Definitely. Speaking of coaching, I think one question mark going into this season, and I think it's going to continue to be a question mark, is Zach Taylor, right? A lot of people were unsure about the hire at the start, right. Even more unsure as a couple of years have gone on. We kind of know what the situation is with Mike Brown. He's not going to fire anybody. Like, that's just not what he does. It's not how the Bengals do things over there. You got to respect that, I guess. But I guess my question is about the coaching situation is, where do you see improvements that could be made that are possible? with Zach Taylor as a head coach? Like, where do you see his areas of growth that you would kind of expect for him coming into this 2021 season?
I think so. One thing that I will give Zach credit for that Marvin Lewis didn't do, and by no means or no stretch of the imagination am I saying that he's even in the realm of Marvin Lewis. But the one thing that Marvin Lewis, one of his flaws was that he was too proud sometimes to change certain things. Zach is a guy that learns from his mistakes. So if you recall on the AFC North talk, I talked about how bad his play calling was at the beginning of the season. By like the middle of the season, he kind of shut me up because the play calling got better. The only thing that I can say, it's really hard to say that because when you really evaluate him from the beginning of this season to the end of the season, I can say that he was a better coach by the end of the season. Now, that Ravens game was just crazy. But when I say that he was a better coach, I think I'm talking about the stretch when Joe Burrow really kind of came into his stride, when you got that win at Tennessee and you kind of even lost Joe Burrow and you had the wins against Pittsburgh and Houston. The things that stuck out to me that he wasn't doing at the beginning of the season was he was way more aware of situational football by the end of the season and those right decisions to make by the end. I still think that he can continue to get better with that. Another flaw was that he didn't run the ball much at the beginning of the season. Towards the end of the season, he was running the ball. Continue doing that. It's hard to say. I would probably just say what he can get better on is getting a better pulse of the locker room, like actually like doing away with some of the drama that we kind of heard about, like some kind of the dictatorship that was kind of happening. I think that he needs to kind of take that and understand it's better to have players on your side than you taking the Adam Gase route and going against the players. Because at the end of the day, these players have to play for you. And at the end of the day, these players have already signed contracts that may have them there for 3 or 4 seasons. You don't have that. You only have 1 year. So I would probably say get more connected with your players. Like you did it with Joe Burrow. You let Joe Burrow come in and give you advice about what plays he wanted to run in the offense. And I get it, right? You know, you can't treat a linebacker like a quarterback, but at the end of the day, get to know your team and get to know what they're comfortable with doing. Like if majority of the guys are comfortable with running this play or running this, or they're buying into this, or they're telling you and giving you feedback on certain things, make it be an open door policy. That doesn't mean that they have the final say. You have the final say, but at least have an open door policy with your players that makes them feel like my coach is really here like for me. And don't make false promises. That's another thing that I'll say. Don't really get into the whole false promises thing, because you'll get these guys to get in shape like Billy Price or something like that, right? Billy Price was told to gain this weight and get in shape, and then he wasn't even given a fair chance. Give those guys like your word. Like if you're going to stand on something, stand on it. That's all that I can say really about Zach Taylor, because people can see through that. Like people can see when you say one thing and then it comes out in the media that it's something else, or they see by your decision makings that it's something else. I'd say that. The other thing I probably say is keep that same energy and accountability that you have with those players with your staff. Like keep that accountability with them. Like we did see them move on from Jim Turner. It shouldn't have taken that long though. I saw a lot of players serve as the scapegoats. I saw a lot of blame get pushed on all other areas instead of some of those coaches. Now, I'm not saying that he should just take out or throw one of his coaches under the bus in the media, but, you know, it's just got to be that same consistency across the board. Like if there's certain things that aren't working right, if Lou isn't calling the right plays on defense, take the play calling away from him. Give it to someone else. Like that's what I would probably say are the biggest things for him to improve on. Not necessarily most of the things on the field, because I did see him improve on those things from the beginning of the season to the end. But it's kind of the off the field, kind of in the locker room how you kind of run your organization, kind of things that I think that he needs to work on.
Yeah. Now let's take a step back here and talk about the AFC and the AFC North as a whole. It's a tough conference. I mean, like if I can name out the quarterbacks right now: Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert might be coming up here. Joe Burrow, he plays on the Bengals, obviously. He might become something here. Who knows where Deshaun Watson is going to end up? More than likely, it's going to be in the AFC. Who knows what Trevor Lawrence turns out to be? He's probably going to be in the AFC. The playoff picture was crowded last year. It looks like it's going to be just as crowded next year and for the next few years. The AFC North was crowded last year. It looks like it's going to be just as crowded as it was last year, this year. Now, I think the Bengals could be able to take a chance and get into that mix, but I think anybody would say that the Bengals, even if Joe Burrow comes back, plays well, has a good offensive line, they have another step that they would have to take to get on the same level as a Cleveland or a Baltimore team that's been into the playoffs and won a playoff game. That's just another step they would have to take there. So for Bengals fans, knowing what the picture is on the outside looking and knowing that, the best chance to attack is the rookie deal, and knowing that even getting the success or making the playoffs within Joe Burrow's rookie deal is going to be a tall task because the insane depth of the conference for the next few years because of how young and talented it is. Where are Bengals fans at with that? Have they realized that one yet, or are they just kind of like just worried about the rebuild?
I think where Bengals fans are at that, where they're at with that, is that they're actually comfortable with Joe Burrow when you bring up those guys. Like, of course, Pat Mahomes, like these guys haven't gone anywhere, right? Like we've been used to seeing Pat Mahomes. We've seen Lamar Jackson. We've seen all of these guys. You're less confident when you say those teams when you have Andy Dalton. Like when Andy Dalton's your quarterback, you're just like, bro, we're not winning anything. Like there's no way we're going to the playoffs. There's no way we're winning a Super Bowl. There is no way that we're doing all of that. Like Baker Mayfield. I remember when you guys drafted Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson went to the Ravens, the very first thing I did was I jumped in my Bengals Real Talk group chat and I was like, bro, it's over for us. The Browns just got Baker Mayfield. The Ravens just got Lamar Jackson. Big Ben is still in Pittsburgh. We got the worst quarterback in the division. And I guarantee you, I said that. Like, I know for a fact that I said that when it happened. Like, before Baker or LJ took a snap. No cap. Like, I said that. So, when you have someone like a Joe Burrow, he is an X factor. He does make you confident. Yes, there is, like you have said, a lot of guys in better situations, but you have to build on the situation that you have right now. And I think if they just really just get this man an offensive line, I think that that's going to give us a chance because we've seen him look very good without an offensive line, without a great coach, first year in the system. Now, that's not to say that he might not have a sophomore slump. Obviously, he's coming back off of a knee injury, but there's just a different vibe when you have Joe Burrow. I can't really put it into words per se, but you just have this hope that he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that he's going to have this team competing, especially like some quarterbacks. I'd probably say they couldn't handle coming to the Bengals and going and finishing top 5 and stuff like that. Joe Burrow can handle that. Like he was used to being this guy that was a winner, but after that happened, and he got like that feeling of what it was like to win, he wants that. And that's going to be infectious. And I think that it just injects this team with a lot of energy. Like he feeds off of the energy from Joe Mixon and stuff like that. So yes, it's definitely going to be an issue. You do have Pat Mahomes and stuff like that. But I feel way more comfortable of Pat Mahomes versus Joe Burrow than Pat Mahomes versus Andy Dalton. Or Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson versus Andy Dalton. So, yeah, it's definitely a great point there, but you still feel like he's the X factor. It's like if you had Aaron Rodgers right now and he's in there and he's having to deal with Tom Brady and Drew Brees and, all of these cats that are coming out of the NFC, you still got a guy that when it comes to those games, when it's on the line, it's going to come down to the quarterback. Like even in the playoffs, it's going to come down to the quarterback. So when I have to take on a Ryan Tannehill, I already feel in my head, we already have the advantage at quarterback. But it just can't all be on the quarterback, as you said. So some of those guys, like you said, Lamar Jackson, he's in a way better situation because he's got a great defense there. He's got a great front office that's going to get him any and every weapon. You got Pat Mahomes, who's got one of the greatest coaches of all time, in Andy Reid. Andy Reid's going to be gone, though, in a while. Like, you got to think about that, too. Like, how long is Andy Reid going to be coaching? What are they going to do once Andy Reid isn't there? I'm not saying that Pat Mahomes is going to fall off a cliff, but I think a lot of people don't give Andy Reid the credit that he's deserved because this is a man that's always going to the playoffs. Like, he was going 11-5 with Alex Smith. No shade to Pat Mahomes, but it's not like Andy Reid was some scrub that you just picked up out of nowhere that wasn't like a guy that got the Eagles and all of these explosive offenses to the Super Bowl. So you have to think about it from that perspective. And then you just never know what's going to happen, bro. Like, you don't know, like, if that game where Trevor Lawrence is on the schedule, like, he might be hurt that week. Like, you might be playing somebody else or, you know, you just never really know in these situations how that stuff is going to play out. You just got to hope for the best and put your best foot forward. But I think that Bengals fans will be confident just because they have Joe Burrow, but they understand that you have to put at least an offensive line around them and some solid pieces, or else you're not going to be able to compete with the greater organizations that have better talent surrounding these good quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I feel like I get your point there where you're like, you have Joe Burrow, and I feel like the best analogy for this is like in basketball, right? Where remember the Atlanta Hawks, they had like those 60-win teams that nobody ever believed in, but all of a sudden not the Milwaukee Bucks, but the Dallas Mavericks, and you got Luka Doncic, walking around there. You feel like, okay, I got somebody who can create a shot in the clutch, and that makes you feel like you could steal any game that you want. And that's how Bengals fans do feel about Joe Burrow. Now, to your point about Andy Reid and the Chiefs, looks like the league is doing its best job to make sure Eric Bieniemy is going to be over there to take that throne, which would be a gift to Patrick Mahomes to have the same offensive coordinator for pretty much his entire career, if possible. But it is going to be very interesting seeing what these young guys do. I mean, the AFC North is crazy young and going to be crazy good. The AFC, I mean, like we saw it this year with 4 quarterbacks under the age of 26, and it's only getting younger. It is a young man's game in the AFC. It is a young man's game in the AFC North. Shout out Big Man, because he's not a young man no more. I don't know. He don't look too spry to me. We had to get some Steelers slander in here.
Definitely. The one interesting point that you make about the AFC is I think that is going to force, and I think they've been talking about it. I don't know what's come to fruition on it, but I think the talent is going to be so good that you're going to have to like almost eliminate the whole idea of conferences eventually and just have to do the best teams. And you're going to have to let more teams in, and you're just going to have to let them duke it out. Cause like you can't, like if the NFC gets super weak, and it's almost like the issue that the NBA has in a sense sometimes when it was really bad, when it was like you only really had 2 or 3 good teams in the East, but you had like 12 good teams in the West, and you had teams with like winning records at one point that weren't even making it in the West, and then you had these teams that were under 500 making it in the East. You're going to have that issue, I think. And, with so many great quarterbacks, you're going to have to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, and the crazy part is that it's not like some of the good young quarterbacks are in the AFC. All of the good young quarterbacks are in there. Like all of them. I think the youngest good
Trevor Lawrence is on the way.
Yeah, and the youngest quarterback that's available in the NFC that you could even consider like a good one is maybe Jared Goff. Carson Wentz, after that, it gets real bad. They're gonna, who knows where they're gonna ship some of these quarterbacks out with. Kirk Cousins on the last year of that expensive deal. Who knows if he gets traded to an AFC team, and you're gonna end up in a situation where like it's gonna get ridiculous. Like the Chiefs or the Ravens or the Browns are a really good team will be like one loss away from like missing the playoffs entirely. While you look on the NFC side and you got, the Bears, Mitchell Trubisky out here in the playoff game on Nickelodeon, like he walked into the wrong classroom. Like he didn't know, like he wasn't sure how he got there, but he was there. And I think that's going to become a situation where you're going to continue to see 500 to sub 500 teams make it in the NFC because there are just no quarterbacks over there. And there's not going to be an opportunity to get quarterbacks because the really bad teams are also going to be in the AFC because they're getting pounded on by the teams with the really good quarterbacks that happen to populate. It's going to create a interesting balance system. I think the NFL is more uniquely qualified to just abolish it because it's artificial. The divisions are important, of course. You can keep those, but everything else about the conferences is pretty artificial, right? Like AFC, NFC champ, like nobody really cares about the difference. It's a game on Fox and a game on CBS. It's really the difference. So your
Pro Bowls actually might matter for the quarterback position. Like, how do you pick a Pro Bowl quarterback for the AFC? Like, what even goes into that?
How do you justify it with what's going to be on the NFC side? You're going to have Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and who knows as a third quarterback right there. And you're going to have Kirk Cousins out there. Meanwhile, the AFC side, you're going to have three dudes who might have won MVP recently. In that like the disparity is.
It almost makes me wonder, like, did Tom Brady, was he also thinking about how many good quarterbacks were in the AFC and noticed that the NFC was kind of like lacking? I almost wonder that now. Like, maybe he kind of saw that Mahomes was gunning for the AFC. He kind of saw Lamar Jackson because, he's a fan of these guys. He said it. So maybe Brady was on to something. I don't know.
Brady's a smart guy. He reads the tea leaves. He's a guy who likes to know what he's getting into. And, he made a good bet going to the NFC side of the bracket because it's his guys. It's his community over there. His golf buddies, He's playing against Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers. Those are his dudes. He was not trying to be out there against like a Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, those are, or even a Josh Allen. I'm talking about like the athletic freaks. I know Browns fans will be like, why you ain't mention Baker Mayfield? Baker Mayfield's a different thing than those three guys are. Those three guys are just, we have not seen that before in the NFL. Most like Josh Allen, you could say you kind of saw it with Cam Newton, but he's a little bit different than Cam. But it's just insane that all of them, and the one coming in this year, all in the AFC. And boy, does that, if we thought this year's playoff race was tight, I don't think that's going anywhere. Like, no, this is not be like.
It's not. The only thing that you can say is the one hope that you may have is that it's gonna balance out a lot of the teams in the AFC because Trevor Lawrence is gonna have to go against, Josh Allen and some of these other guys. So maybe like with them being in the same division, it may help balance things out a little bit. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's still going to make it harder too. Like, so I think you'll possibly, I don't know if you'll see like 14-2 in the AFC anymore. Like, it's going to probably drop down to like 12-4, maybe 11-5 is the 1 seed. And like, you're going to get a whole bunch of like 9-7s and 10-6s, and
you're going to have a team that like in week 15 going to look like they could win the 1 seed and not be in the playoffs by week 17. Like it's going to be that crazy. And you go in the NFC, like I guess the best young quarterback in the NFC is probably like Kyler Murray, but like he imploded at the end of this season.
Yeah, so it's probably Kyler. It's really wide open for Kyler because I think the 49ers, unless they go out and pull a trade for someone, I think that they kind of blew that. And then, you got Russell Wilson there. So I think he's going to be like your future there in terms of like your future elder statesman once Brady gets out of there. But it's almost kind of wide open for Kyler. It's kind of interesting to see like what he's going to do with that wide open field over there.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see what Kyler does there with the wide open field he has and everything. But it's just like you put Derek Carr over there, you can make the argument Derek Carr might have been the best young quarterback in the NFC. And we don't even talk about him in the conversation when it comes to the AFC. He is forgotten about. And he might be better than Kirk Cousins, who's one of the better NFC quarterbacks out there. It is just an insane disparity within I don't know how this happened. But
Andy Dalton might want to try to get an NFC job or something. I don't know.
He's on the Cowboys still, right? Like he's still technically over there. You know what I mean? Like if I don't know why Deshaun Watson don't want to go to the NFC. I don't understand that.
The crazy thing is the Colts are in a weird situation because they literally have nobody except for like I can't even remember the guy's name signed at quarterback. So they're gonna have to make a trade. So there's another quarterback coming to the AFC. When it happens, I don't know if it. I would probably put my money on Stafford going there, but somebody's going there. Like they're gonna make a play like they did when they went and got Phillip Rivers last year. Somebody's coming back to the Colts. So there's gonna be another. There's gonna be two added and maybe even three. You know, depending on what happens in the draft. But it's not gonna slow down. There's definitely gonna be some more people being added for sure.
So look, if you any team that think you got any type of playoff hopes within the next 3 years, y'all need to understand that situation, and the sense of urgency needs to be on. And I'm talking to you, Cleveland Browns. These next 2 years are it for you. If you really want to be able to contend in the way that Cleveland thinks this team can contend, these next 2 years are it. I think the Bengals, they got like about 4 years, but I think in the last 2 years of that Joe Burrow window is going to be really important because then you're going to be talking about a lot of these guys who are hot right now. The Bakers, the 2018 draft class, they're going to be on their grown man deals, which is going to affect the team's ability to build around them. I think that's when Joe Burrow's window is going to open up. So if I'm the Bengals, lay cool, see what you can do, build. But if it don't go too fast, you can accumulate some of these picks and really just try to build a clever rebuild and really aim for Joe Burrow's fourth and fifth year to really be that attack year for this franchise. Because I do think that's when you might get some breathing space with how ridiculous this conference is. But who knows? They might just keep coming in. They might just keep bringing these quarterbacks in. So who knows? Who knows? But it's going to be a tough one. Ace, thank you for coming on, man. Let them know where to find you.
You guys can find me at New Stripe City and also the AFC North Talk with my guy Quincy. Please feel free to stop by and check out anything that you're looking for Bengals news. Sometimes we have interviews with players on there. I'll be having some mock draft stuff up there as well. But also be sure to subscribe to the AFC North Talk channel so you can hear all of our stuff there as well.
Yes, sir. So definitely check out his channel. Orange is the New Black podcast as well with him and Zim Hude. It's a banger as always. He got film reviews on his channel. He got it all. He Kmart of the Cincinnati Bengals fans right there. So he's got it all and then some. But thank you, Ace, for coming on. And again, if you want to see more of me and Ace interact, there's a ton of stuff on this channel, but also there's a ton of stuff on his channel, and there's a ton of stuff on AFC North Talk. But again, guys, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.